It doesn't matter what your dreams and hopes and ambitions are. It doesn't matter if you have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend or you've got plans for the future. You can forget those plans because you're going to wind up dead.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Shot on Video panel. My name is Miguel Myers. I host a podcast called My Horror Confessional, and I also have a podcast with our illustrious Max Booth III, and we do Decayed Tapes. It's about specifically about shot on video horror. So I am going to let everybody introduce themselves. Jason, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm Jason Krawczyk. I'm an author and filmmaker. I also co-own Little Ghost with my husband Chris over there. Look at them and make them uncomfortable, and then that's it. I also really love like Z-grade cinema and shot on video stuff, and I don't have a podcast, but I've been on a lot of them and listened to a lot of them.
I'm Daniel Kraus, author of many books, and also a devotee of shot on video weirdness and sleaze and horror, and we can talk about this later, but as a teenager, shot a lot of those on VHS and a lot of horror stuff with my friends in Iowa in our backyards and stuff. So I have a real deep affection for that kind of thing.
I am Max Booth, co-host of the Decayed Tapes podcast. We also have promo for the podcast. Buy the baby stick. Anyone could take some, and please take some and listen. Also co-host of the Ghoulish Book Fest. Yeah.
Cool. So real quick, I just wanted to let you guys know that the reason Max and I started our podcast is not because we are geniuses in shot on video and know everything about it. In fact, we didn't know a lot about it, and that was one of the blind spots in our horror journey. So we actively wanted to challenge ourselves to watch some of these shot on video horror movies. But a brief overview of those who don't know. So basically, shot on video is when you shoot on tape for the VCR. What happened was that in the late 70s, when the VCR was introduced, early 80s, the studios didn't want to license their films for that because they thought people were going to copy them and they were going to lose money, lose revenue. So these distributors and these entrepreneurs and these just dudes in their backyard realized that there was a marketplace for it. So they started shooting. They took advantage of it and started making these shot on video. And some were made specifically for the home video, for the home video market, and some were just like trash, and we'll get into that as well. So that's just like really, really brief overview. I did want to ask you guys, how did you guys come into shot on video? Was that like your first entrance into horror, or like everybody else, were you just like a junkie on horror and then you were searching for the next big hit, like the next hit? You, Jason, if you want to go first.
I'm gonna say it's like video rental stores when we still had like VHS tapes.
Yeah.
So like Blockbuster, because like there's always a section when you get into the horror section in like a Blockbuster or West Coast Video or what have you, where it's just like, what is werewolves versus zombies versus Predator? Like, how is that a thing? And then you rent enough of those, and then you kind of like can start to pick up like, this doesn't feel like you're not sure what film is yet in your like young pre-progressive mind, but you're like, this feels like what like my dad would shoot on. Like, how is that possible? And I think the first one that I registered that with was Reanimator 3, the one where he's in prison, because that one's shot on video, and I was like, why does this look so different and weird? It just has a different feel to it. Like, it just feels unprofessional, and I'm 9, and I could feel that. But like, finding like the DIY aspect of like shot on video stuff is just really charming, and like you can kind of like relate to the people making it more. Like, oh, if I was gonna try to do this, I don't think I could do any better than what they're doing. So like, but like there's a empathy there that doesn't come along with like a high budget production value with film. So yeah, that's pretty much video stores is really the answer in short.
Yeah, I mean, I think empathy is the key word there. So yeah, as I said, when I was growing up in Iowa, my dad uncharacteristically brought home a video camera, and it was a mini VHS. So imagine VHS, but even shittier. And I shot so many movies on this thing. I mean, just hours and hours worth of productions, starting a couple minutes long, going up to by the end, I was making these unwatchable 2.5-hour epics. But I had no editing software. This is like, you know, late 80s, early 90s, so everything had to be edited like in camera. So everyone had to nail it on the first take, or there is no second take. I mean, you just had to kind of get it. And it's shocking after when I got up to the point where I'm making 2.5-hour movies, like, you got really good at that. Like, just editing in camera, in sequence as much as possible. Any flubs had to stay in, which all makes it all the more charming. So I really, really have a deep down affection for people who work, you know, like people say, oh, I work outside this system, but they're still making, you know, $15 million movies or whatever. I mean, the further away you can get is the more I'm enamored of it. So the people who are still just making movies in their garage with their friends in the same way that I did as a kid, but with much better, gooier effects or whatever, that is just my catnip. I live for that stuff. This is my favorite panel I've ever been on, because I just don't get to ever talk about my real love for shot on video stuff, whether it's from the 80s or being made today.
Do you remember the title for your like first movie you made on? The
first movie I made was a little 3-4 minute movie called Cat Killer. But where they really got more ambitious is we started making remakes, or I say we, me and my friends, my production company. So we made a remake of Misery. We did The Blob, and the greatest part of The Blob was when someone was in a car getting chased by the blob, and so then I cut to a Matchbox car being pulled by a piece of fish string, and then it connected to the Matchbox car. A few inches behind it was a wad of garbage bag that sort of looked like the blob, and you just kind of pull it along. So like that stuff is just, I mean, to this day, I don't know that I've made anything that I like more than my 15-minute version of the blob. We did Night of the Living Dead. Eventually, we started making more original stuff, but the first, you know, few bigger ones were versions of real movies.
Do you like have that still? Yeah.
Yep.
You should bring it.
You
next
should
time.
put that somewhere. Yeah.
We should have screened The Blob.
We should do an SOV Film Fest.
Yeah. I mean, most of the stuff I made is just unwatchable, but The Blob hits that little sweet spot where it is kind of fun to see.
That's great.
And of course, because it was made in 1989 Iowa, everyone's wearing shorts. Like someone could be a professor, shorts. Sheriff, shorts. We look like idiots.
That's usually my wardrobe, so thank you. I do think we should mention that when people talk about SOV, there's two different camps. So there's the SOV, when people talk about it, they mean only movies actually shot on video. And then they also mean just movies that have that vibe to it. So sometimes you'll see like digital movies or movies shot like on 16 or Super 8, but they all have that DIY vibe to it. Well, it seems like just some maniac in a garage had a lot of free time and always wanted to make a movie, and they finally did it. And it's always fun. Even the bad ones are fun because you see somebody like doing something they are so passionate about. So like I'm sure we'll mention a bunch of them at some point, but like we just watched one that was a Super 8 movie called Debbie Does Damnation. Incredible fucking movie. Lots of claymation, lots of just like really DIY sets. one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, and you can't find. We found it on the Internet Archive. I mean, a lot of these are just gone. But how I got introduced to this was my mom's best friend growing up. She would often just download movies from LimeWire and put them on discs. And whenever we would visit, she would just have a new flip book of DVDs to hand me, and I would take home as a small child. And always really inappropriate movies. And I think like the first shot on video movie I must have watched was Redneck Zombies, which I think is a trauma movie. Fantastic movie. There's just something about those types of movies where it seems like this might be a little dangerous. Like, is this a snuff film? Because they didn't have someone going, oh, no, you can't show that to the public. You could just do anything in these movies, and then people watch it, and sometimes they will forever change in good ways and bad ways. But like Daniel, I also made a bunch of like DIY things, not on videotape, but on digital camera. But like it was so fun as a kid. I remember begging my mom, like at the age of 9, to buy me a box of condoms because I saw in I saw in the bonus features of the movie The Hills Have Eyes that Wes Craven made fake guts by taking peanut butter and stuffing them in condoms. So I was like, I want to do that, but she would not do it, and to this day, I'm mad about it. That's kind of how I got into my love for this type of stuff.
So I wanted to talk about some of the highs and some of the lows. You guys already said, even if they're bad, they're still a lot of fun. What is your peak shot on video horror, and what is the lowest of the low for you guys?
Oh, man.
Or some of the lowest of the lows.
I don't know. That's a tough one. Because, it's really when you see them kind of give up, and it's just kind of like a shot that lasts forever, and you can't really hear it.
Slow-mo?
Slow-mo.
Sledgehammer? Sledgehammer has 15 minutes of slow-mo.
And it's just because they didn't have enough time to do like a run time, so they just, okay, let's do slow-mo until we reach 80 minutes. I mean, we've read interviews with these people where they said, yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. It's kind of when the ingenuity kind of stops, like when they're trying to, they're not inventive and they're not even trying, and they kind of give up on themselves. They're like, oh no, you can do it, just try. I mean, we'll laugh at it, but it's out of genuine love. I don't know really. I don't know. There's some. I'm a part of a movie group called The Gory Hole, and it's all.
How do we all join that?
I don't know.
It's a secret society.
It's a secret society, yeah. It's got some, but their stuff's like the stuff that borders on snuff, right? Like the August Undergrounds and the Bunny Game and stuff like that. But once in a while, we're starting to what's the Z grade version of these? And once we start with the watch, I was like, these are not good.
We need to reevaluate.
But there's one I watched recently called Gateway Meat, and they're trying to push the boundaries for gore and effects and all this stuff, but there's they have their kids in it, and that's when I'm like, don't stop that. That's it's like a 5-year-old. Keep that kid out of this. You don't know what there's that kid is taking in, and how it's gonna manifest later, because it's you're trying to offend people as hard as you can, and having a kid saying anti-Semitic stuff while shooting someone in the head is not cool to do. You got to remember these things are supposed to be fun, or at least engaging, and that stuff's that's the lowest of the low for me. When you kind of cross over and oh, this is this became a mouthpiece for how weird you are and how your downgraded worldviews. That's when it's don't.
So specifically, I meant maybe some titles, the high, the peak. SOV horror movie, or
oh man, a feeder. Feeders, yeah. That's a Ghoulies-esque miniature rapscallion monster kind of things, but they're little gray aliens. So they have the big bulbous heads and the big eyes, and they're gray, but they don't have articulated limbs. So it's just people just throwing toys at you. That's wonderful beyond belief, and it's all shot on video. It's mostly in basements because they don't want to ruin the upholstery. so that's the stuff. Like, yeah, the feeders is definitely. I think there's a feeders too. So like I didn't see. Yeah.
How about for you, Daniel?
I don't know. I don't have any specific titles that I would say are low points, but I'm guessing that I've probably seen some that are more towards the snuff side, and I'm not even necessarily against all of those either.
Pro
but-
snuff.
Pro snuff.
Daniel Kraus is
Pro
pro
snuff.
snuff.
Oh, yeah, probably. I'm pro snuff. This is going great. But there are probably some of those that I've seen that I feel like I don't feel the joy. I mean, there's there's a sense of, I think, joy to all this stuff, no matter how dark it is. But for highlights, I have all sorts of highlights. The main person that I want to talk up, that I've talked up before and on these events like this, is Brian Paulin,
Yeah.
who is just the best. He's this dude, I think he lives in Pennsylvania, in some suburb, and he has been making, in very much the same style as I made movies as a teenager. He just, because all of his friends are it's the same group of friends, even though they're probably in their 40s now. And they're just making these extremely gory movies. It seems like mostly the same basement, same garage in most of them. And clearly they don't want to mess up the upholstery, because there'll be like scenes where there's just people like lying in bed, and it'll still be in this basement, like on the cellar floor, you know. But I find everything about Brian Paulin impressive, and I mean that sincerely. And I find his dedication to what he's doing moving, quite frankly. Like, he's doing nothing right in terms of getting his movies out there. You can only order them from his extremely janky website that rarely works. You might have to contact him directly, as I have in the past, and say, I can't get your website to work. I'm trying to buy your movies. So it's like an effort. But back in the day, like when I was in college in the 90s, like, that was what you had to do for anything. It was an effort. You had to find somebody who had access to underground dubs of things. So almost part of the journey here is that Brian Paulin does not make it easy to get his movies, but they are highly impressive. Like, the gore is unbelievable, 100% practical, the goopiest, sloppiest stuff you've ever seen. None of it's comedic in the slightest. He plays everything 100% dramatic. Which just makes it all the better. You can't go wrong with Brian Paulin. My favorite is Fetus. Again, I don't know how to describe the plot. None of the plots ever make perfect sense, but the passion of what he's doing is, if only most artists could have a piece of that passion. I'm just endlessly impressed by Brian Paulin. And I want to meet him someday. And I was someone reminded me of this yesterday. I was on an episode of Colors of the Dark, and I talked about Brian Paulin.
Yeah, that's where I heard about him.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And so Brian Paulin contacted me. For me, this was a great, a wonderful moment. And he said, people have told me you mentioned this, and I got a bump in sales. Bump in sales is probably 3 copies. But, so that was for me, that was a great moment in life.
That's awesome.
Like, if a movie star reached out to me and said, "Hey, I liked your book," I don't care. But Brian Paulin, I was so excited.
Well, I heard you mention it on the Colors of the Dark, and I think you did the deep cuts as well when you were talking about him, maybe. And I was talking to Max about him. And Max, you'd heard about him already, right?
Yeah, I knew about Septic, which is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you talking about his practical effects kind of leads me into my next thing, which is the practical effects that we're seeing this, because obviously shot in video typically 80s and 90s, there's no CGI. It's all practical effects, like the condoms that you were talking about.
The condoms I never got.
the condoms you never got.
To this day, I have never seen a condom.
So, maybe you could talk about your love for like the practical effects that we see in these movies, because that's one of the things that I think as horror fans, like, the movie could suck, but if there's a cool ass practical effect, it was worth it, you know?
Well, I think that's just like what we kind of miss about like 80s and 90s horror movies, because like it doesn't have to look real, it just kind of has to look rad. And like that, and that's kind of like ultimate endearing aspects of like shot on video stuff. It's just like, oh, they figured out a way to do it.
They went for it.
They went and they did it, and like that audacity that they were like, we're gonna have like a monster, or we're gonna cut someone's head off, and we don't even have a film book. Like, we're just gonna figure it out on our own. And I think that's the charming aspect of it, and not to take away from the fact that it's not effective. There are like some great, shot on video movies that I'm like, oh, that looks real, like that looks really rough, or it looks like at the same time like, oh, that's so silly and bad, but it looks so charming to see it and witness it happen, and then like, and you can kind of feel like them play, like you can kind of feel them designing this idea and having it come into fruition. Like, it's such a cool thing to see that some like a bunch of guys in their basement were drunk one night. Like, what happens if this like zombie like ate a burrito and then like shat out a turkey, and then like let's do it, and they figured out a way to do it. So yeah, it's charming. Soul Tangler. Soul Tangler is a shot on video movie that has some great. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's good. Like, that has like full animatronic zombie monsters.
Did AGFA release that recently?
Yeah, I think everyone.
Yeah, you can get it on the Vinegal Syndrome website. That's how I got it.
Yeah. They have one of the best taglines for that movie. Like, it's like Evil Dead shot at the price of a used car or something like that. And I was like, yeah, it's Soul Tangler.
How would you, Daniel? What is it that you like love about like the practical effects?
Well, I mean, you can really, again, it goes back to joy. You can sense their excitement and pride of the effects. Like in a lot of big budget movies, even if they have a great effect, they're probably going to show it briefly for dramatic purposes. But in a Brian Pollan movie, someone's face is going to be melting, and they'll cut back to someone going, cut back to the face melting for like 5 minutes. They really want to get their money out of the face melting. And I think what I find fascinating about these movies is it's so clear what fascinates them. And if you watch a like studio movie, there's so many filters that goes through that it's, they are for reasons of budget. It makes sense. They're trying to think of what is the mass of people, what would connect with the most people. And these filmmakers, they don't care. All they're thinking about is what connects with me right now. Yeah. And that, you can really learn a lot about a person or a time or a place. There's this. And this one's on the less obscure side, but there's a great SOV movie called Black Devil Doll from Hell, which was shot by Chester Turner. So he was a black filmmaker in the 80s in the south side of Chicago. And there's like, forget for a moment how great this movie is, but like there's no footage of people living in the south side of Chicago in the 80s. So it also just provides this like really startling and valuable window into what life was like.
Yes.
And that's just amazing. And then on top of that, you have this guy who's it's sort of about this, what's about a black devil doll from hell, which is more or less a ventriloquist dummy, who then sort of like, I'm not even gonna bother. But,
if Black Devil Doll from Hell doesn't sell you already, you're probably not gonna watch it.
But yeah, so to get back to your question, the effects in that one are not gory, but they're extremely charming because this devil doll has to move on its own. So I think they use the same thing I used as a kid. They use fish line to sort of, you can just see the line, to lift up the arms and make it like scooter around the house. And it's, yeah, I mean, we're from a fan base that likes seeing the seams to it.
Yes, yeah,
likes
that's
seeing
a great way to put it.
how it's made, because that personalizes it. You feel like a human being made this, and a human being had these thoughts, and a human being had these fascinations. And it's just like in mass media, you get less and less of a direct connection with the human behind it. It's particularly once you start adding in digital effects and stuff, it's just like all these layers are being put between you and another person. But with these movies, you are just like right there next to them and their obsessions.
Yeah. Max?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to keep in mind, like, movies that rely so much on CGI, like the cast in the scene, they have like a fucking tennis ball they're looking at. Like, you can't really act to that, but when you have the actual practical effect, it changes something when it's in the room. I mean, I've been lucky enough to write one movie that got made, and I was so stoked when I found out pretty much everything was going to be practical effects. And like I was like involved like with the guy who did it, Dan Rebuild. He's a fucking champ. He did practical effects on Slither by James Gunn. He's amazing. He would send these videos he would make in his garage of himself just like making like tongues that pulsate and stuff. It was the coolest thing of all time. And like with all these shot and video movies we watch, it's that joy of seeing someone take on like a creative project and come up with a way to be gross and disgusting. It's just awesome. We watched recently a movie called Black Past by this insane drillman guy named Olaf Ittenbach, and he writes, directs, and does all the practical effects himself, and these are the craziest, almost like realistic looking blood effects I've ever seen. People seeing like just heads melt. In that movie, I think one of my favorite practical effects was this guy, he wakes up and goes outside into the town is covered in smoke, and this baby carriage is just going by itself, and he looks inside and there's like just a baby in it, bleeding from the eyes and crying, and suddenly its fucking head just falls off, and he's like, ah! It was amazing. I mean, only in SOV movies can you see like a baby's head falling off, and it's like, fuck yes.
You could have never seen that coming. It's unguessable what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And also, if I might throw one other thing, what's the movie you mentioned where everything is slow-mo?
Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer. So I kind of love Sledgehammer, too. Another thing that happens is you get these moments of accidental, almost like transcendental beauty in these movies. And I think Sledgehammer is a good example where it's just like, yeah, it's mostly inept, but when you get these, like, pointless, sort of seemingly pointless slow motion shots of like some burnout, like shooting down a beer or something like that. But it's just like this type of person in this type of shitty cellar drinking this type of beer has never been lavished in slow motion before.
Yeah.
And you get these like that moment we've all seen a million times in life, but we've never seen it like that in slow motion. And there's sometimes strange things happen in these movies, especially when you're talking about things shot on VHS, where there's a certain amount of analog murk to it, that it kind of gets this, it's not grainy, because grainy is film, but it gets this sort of analog strangeness to them that does have a certain kind of abstract beauty to it. So even within these kind of dumb images, I find kind of beautiful sometimes, like literally sort of aesthetically pleasing. Yeah,
there's a reason the panel is called The Beauty of SOV, because I agree, absolutely. And speaking of Sledgehammer, it's something I remember reading like with an interview with the guy who made it, who hates the movie, by the way. That's another thing. Half the times you'll read interviews with people who made these movies 20, 30 years later, and they're always like, I don't know why anyone likes that movie. It sucks. But we like it. But that movie takes place at a cabin by a lake, I think, and he was talking about how he couldn't control his friends. Like they just kept inviting people to come hang out as he was trying to make the movie. So he eventually just had to kick everybody out because they were just getting drunk all the time as he was actively trying to make this. And I'm sure that's the case with most of these movies. I mean, like when I was trying to make some when I was like 9 or 10, I remember how frustrated I would get with my friends because I would be like, we have to say this line, and they would go, why are you doing this?
Oh, it's so hard to make a movie. So it's a term of endearment of like, we made it. But like, I'm sure a lot of them were like, how hard can it be? And then they give it a shot and like, oh my God, it's really hard. Like just to keep the continuity going and stuff like that, or like wrangling a group of people who are not like professional actors. Not the easiest thing in the world, but you know, it's a victory if you just get something out there. Like the fact, I'm sure there's like, no one's gonna be talking about Sledgehammer, especially on a panel at a book festival.
Decade Tapes talk about Sledgehammer. It's our 4th episode.
Yeah, it's funny. Gilly Cohen, who made one of the best SOV movies of all time, I think, Video Violence, and also, in my opinion, one of the worst movies, Video Violence 2. We've had him on the podcast. We've talked to him, and he's always like, I have no idea why people keep talking about this. It's so great. I mean, the way like these audiences like find these movies and they treat it almost like a religion. It's like, nobody else knows about this, I must protect it and make sure it survives throughout time. It's like so cool, and it's not something you can make happen, because you do see people trying to make it happen with a certain type of movie. Like the Sharknado movies, it's like, we're going to be so bad on purpose that people are going to be like, ironically, this is the best thing I've ever seen, but they always end up sucking. I can't stand those types of movies because there's nothing genuine about them. But with the SOV movies we were talking about, like the ones made specifically like in the 80s and 90s, there's just so much passion, because they're not going into it thinking, oh, we're going to make a dumb movie. They're going into it thinking, I'm going to make a movie like the movie I've always wanted to see happen. And there's just something awesome about that.
Yeah, there's an authenticity that's missing in like Sharknado. Like, I know what you're trying to do, Sharknado. Don't fool me.
Well, one of the things when we were interviewing Carrie Cohen for Video Violence, so we saw Video Violence 1 and 2, and then Captives, which I prefer Captives, but he was talking about the technical setup of having to edit shot on video. Do you guys know how that goes, or Daniel or Jason, do you know how they used to edit on there? And if so, do you want to tell the audience if they don't know? Are you familiar with how they edit?
I'm assuming they would have like multiple VHS
put
together. Yeah, and they would kind of like stop, and they would have like an old deck. So they would have. I'm guessing right now, so I don't actually know.
I'll tell you then if you guys don't know. But we were talking to Gary, and he was like, "Yeah, we literally had 2 VCRs, and we would just be stopping it and recording over, like so you can't like I think I forget who said it, but like you have to. There's not like another shot, right? We got to do it. This is the shot, and just like the aspect of that of like editing on the fly. Like if we fuck this up, it's over with or something like that. I just think goes to the passion of the project that you guys were talking about. So I think what I'm going to do, I want to talk about like the decline of shot on video. But before, I'm going to tell you guys that at the end, I want like you guys throw out movies to these people so they can go and watch some of these movies. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time so you can start thinking about it in your head. But I did want to talk about the death of VHS, right? But like also just like the death of SOV. So, or even if it is dead, if there's somebody still doing it, like the person you were talking about. So why do you guys think that there's been a decline, if you believe there has been a decline in SOV?
I mean, digital.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that probably helped that decline. And like so, like people.
The spirit of it.
The spirit of it's kind of it is and it isn't. Like the people are still making Z-grade cinema. Like I would suggest like Krampus the Christmas Devil, not the Krampus movie that was in the theater. Like, but the Krampus the Christmas Devil is like shot on like phones. And it has that spirit's alive. It's gonna just take us a minute to get there, because like what you were saying, like we don't have like a distribution or marketing. We just have to find these later somehow. Like someone has to find them in a basement, and be like, "What's this?" and then put it in, and then watch it, and be like, "Oh my God!" and then show it around. Like it takes a while to like distribute just by word of mouth. But like, it's still out there. Just I think it comes in waves, and like we have to wait for it to get here. Like August Underground's one that was shot on film. Anybody watch August Underground? Like that's a ghoulish kind of people in chairs getting mutilated for an hour. If that's your thing, it's really well done in that thing.
That's video violence too.
Yeah. But the way they marketed their thing was would put it on a VHS tape that's unmarked, put it into a paper bag, and just like throw it into the street. And then so like. Also, the effects in that look really good. So the problem is someone picked that up, was like, hey, there's an unmarked VHS tape. They went home, put it in the VHS, and they thought it was like, holy shit, we're witnessing a murder. And like, that's a great way to market your video. We all talk, like I know about it now. There's 3 of them. So like he did something right. Like, but like they're not doing that. They're just kind of like, hey, we made it. That's cool. I'm gonna show my uncle, and then or like my best friends and stuff. But they're not like out there on the internet pitching stuff.
Well, I wonder, it's like so like everything's retro, right? Like vinyl has come back.
Yeah.
People are listening to tapes again. Do you see a future where people are getting camcorders again and shooting movies on videotape?
I mean, I have a VHS collection. Like, it's coming back, and like people are making VHS tapes for stuff. So like, it's only a matter of time. It's happening right now. Like it's why we're sitting here talking about it. Like, yeah, people are gonna make shot-on-video films and release them. And especially with YouTube trying to make like the creepiest stuff they could possibly make. Like, it's coming around.
Yeah, I almost feel like the issue used to be that there was a barrier of entry. Like, of course, the barrier of entry for like you're making a 35 millimeter film was very high. But even if you were making an 8 millimeter film, you still had to buy the film, and it wasn't cheap, and get it developed. So you take it to the VHS era, and still yet there was a barrier of entry. You had to get a camcorder, and everyone could afford that, and buy tapes, and find some way to edit them. Now with the phone, everyone can do it, and the barrier of entry is so low that the issue becomes finding them. I'm sure there's a million interesting films, shot on video films on YouTube, but I wouldn't have the slightest idea where to find them. There's a glut now. But so I doubt. I think it's just been a boom. In some ways it's a death, but in some ways it's a boom that's so big that it's almost equivalent to a death because you can't sort it out. But I do think something like Skinamarink is like a new way of thinking about shot on video. Like that could have been something. It feels like something you would have stumbled across on YouTube. And I know the filmmaker, that's kind of where he started. Yeah. But like that feels like something, an evolution of some sort, where it's like it is a no-budget movie made by one person with an extremely specific point of view that is not doing what the 80s shot on video did at all, but is using that sort of like aesthetic and feel of the analog feel to do something new. So so it's weird. It's like a life and a death all at once. It's like something rotting and something else coming up. I don't think that, despite like VHS being kind of back, I don't feel like the next new thing is going to be people shooting on VHS again. I think it'll be something else, some new technology or some.
I've been seeing a lot of TikTok horror.
Yeah, TikTok.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about something that isn't shot with your phone, like some other kind of object, some other kind of.
Like a Game Boy Color, like shoot it on a Game
Yeah,
Boy
like something like
A
that.
clamshell phone.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
was Skinamarink? Yeah, Skinamarink felt like new to me, which
Yeah.
is like hard to like come by. And like no matter what you think about Skinamarink, at the same time I'm like, I wish I just saw this on YouTube by accident, because
Yeah,
then
it
I
has
would be
that-
like, what the fuck
has
is
that
this?
vibe for sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I saw it. So someone sent me a pirated link before it came out, and they said, watch this. I didn't know what it was. I watched it like at midnight in my room, all the lights off and headphones on, and I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I have not seen that movie. I need to check
You
it
would
out.
hate it, Miguel.
We ruined it for you just by this little
I
conversation.
know what you like, Miguel. You would not like it.
But one of the things, Jason, you brought up was like Z-grade or Ghoul Cinema. So I don't know too much about that. Was that shot on video stuff?
Well, it's shot on video stuff. Like I was talking about it with like August Underground and
August.
in like Gateway Meat. Like that stuff's like trying its hardest to feel like a murder. And some are really good at it, and some are kind of captivating. Most are not. And there's a definite market for it. Like people are ravenous for that. It's a small group, but like they are a very like intense group. And it's stuff like that, or August Underground, and I've mentioned that before. But like murder set pieces and stuff. But like the problem with that is too like the filmmakers making that movie. Like, what's the intent behind this? Because if it's just like I hate women and I would just want to see women murdered in a chair for an hour and a half, like
Yeah.
I don't, not my bag. Sorry, buddy. And then, but there's a lot of that now, and there's like I'm assuming if you could like calculate how many of those movies are made, it's way too many. Like it's just like it's more than people are going to watch.
I feel like I want to just geek out right now and ask you guys if you've seen things. But Max and I, we did an episode on this one called The Resurrection of Michael Myers.
Yes.
Have you guys heard of this or seen of this?
No, what's that?
It's on YouTube. We found it, and I think Bleeding Skull. Yeah, Bleeding Skull, Josie.
Yeah, they did a review.
Yeah, they did a review on it, so that's how we found out about it. And it's basically these guys in Sweden or Norway.
Sweden, yeah.
Sweden or Norway, they like just stole Michael Myers, the character, and they just have him in his movie, and it's like slapstick, and it's funny, and it's weird, and it's no subtitles, so we don't know what they were saying, but it looked really funny and really cool.
Yeah.
And they had a part 1 and a part 2, and both of them together are like 45 minutes.
Oh,
and
that's
it's on YouTube, and it's just fucking amazing.
There are some really good like YouTube fan movies with like the Don't Hike Alone, that Jason Voorhees one that they made. Like it's just as good as like any of the Friday the 13th movies, and it's getting like, oh man, do they have to remake a Friday the 13th, or just let these kids make them?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's also good to point out like how to even find these movies now. So like a lot of them are on YouTube, a lot of them are on the Internet Archive, but there's also a lot of like boutique Blu-ray companies that dedicate themselves to finding these movies and doing restorations. I'm a big fan of a company called Vinegar Syndrome. They do great releases. Do you guys like have any other recommendations for like ways to find these?
Well, Bleeding Skull is really the big one, I think.
Yeah.
The thing that's frustrating about Bleeding Skull as a institution is that most of what they do is they review these movies, and then it's like painful because you can't watch them. Like they see everything, and you're just like, God, how do I get copies of this? Now they do have a partnership with AGFA, so they do have a DVD label, Bleeding
They just
Skull.
released Blonde Death.
Yeah.
Highly recommend Blonde Death.
Yeah. So I don't buy a lot of DVDs, but I buy everything that Bleeding Skull puts out because it's all this stuff. Like really, it's all the stuff we're talking about. Fuck the Devil. Remember, you saw Fuck the Devil, right?
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
Fuck the Devil too.
And Fuck the Devil too. Yeah.
So I guess before we ask questions, or I'll open up to the floor for questions, but are there any recommendations you just want to throw out for people that you're like, oh, okay, if you've never seen a shot on video, you start here, or anything like that? This is your chance to champion a movie.
Yeah, I'll begin. I want to do two. So I'll begin with Debbie Does Damnation. I think you can only find it on the Internet Archive. It's
a porno, also. You didn't mention that.
there's a lot of nudity in it, both female and male. So if you want to see, that, which you should, is great. Lots of claymation. Basically, it's about this woman who commits suicide, goes to hell. She's completely naked the whole movie for reasons. And she is given a quest by this insane skull spiral claymation creature that's dubbed to find Satan's missing horns and like fix hell because it's like divided right now, and it is fucking great. Also, I have to bring this up because I think I discovered something. So this movie came out in 1999. The band Avenged Sevenfold also began in 1999. In this movie, there was a claymation creature of a skull with bat wings on it, and that happens to also be the logo for Avenged Sevenfold. I think it's a bit of too much of a coincidence. It looks identical. Also recommend Blonde Death, which just came out through Bleeding Skull. I think it's probably my favorite SOV movie. It's not really like a spooky movie or anything. It's more of a comedic crime movie. It's just incredible.
Everything on Bleeding Skull, really. I would like to point out two or three. If you've never seen a David the Rock Nelson movie,
Yeah, I was gonna
you have to. I wouldn't say you need to watch all of them. You couldn't make it through all of them, but watch one. It's
just him in his backyard, right?
It's just him in his backyard, and he's got to be in his 50s or something.
Yeah.
But he seems to be locked into a state of like a boy in the 1950s. Like it'll be like his movies are like Frankenstein versus Wolfman, and it'll be like somebody with a Frankenstein mask and someone with a Wolfman mask, just kind of going like this for like 30 minutes. It's really bizarre. The other two I'd mention is more recent, just to sort of bring this into like people are still kind of doing this. And a lot of people hate this movie. It came out about 20 years ago. Trash Humpers.
Oh yeah.
But I
like Dreams.
really think Trash Dumpers is a really interesting movie that captures the I found a videotape in a bag on the street vibe. Like there's really nothing else like it, and it is in its own way, I think, really disturbing. And the last one I'd mention is probably the most obscure, but it's shocking that it's obscure. Is Showgirls 2? Has anyone seen Showgirls 2?
Dreams of Penny or whatever it's
Yep.
called?
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Wow, no.
So, short story, you know about Showgirls, the big Paul Verhoeven movie. And at some point, somebody who had a small role in Showgirls somehow got the rights to the title Showgirls and made this movie Showgirls 2, and in which her minor character in Showgirls was the main character. And it's shot on video, directed by her, written by her, starring her, and it has some of the returning characters from Showgirls even, but in this movie that was made for clearly nothing. And it's sort of a weirdo auteur work. Like, it is nothing, almost nothing to do with Showgirls, although the same characters are in it. But like, she's on a TV show, but it's clearly shot in someone's basement. So there's like this weird dissonance between what the plot's saying is happening and what you're seeing, which could be just read as incompetence, but kind of feels like something David Lynchian, where you're like, it's not lining up. The information I'm getting is not lining up with the visuals. And again, either by luck or by skill, there's some really, again, sort of Lynchian moments in it that I don't know if they're happenstance, like sort of the sledgehammer slow motion, or if there are some just bizarrely beautiful, dark sequences in it that I just really think Showgirls 2 needs to be seen.
Yeah.
I think we got our next episode, Max.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm going to do two. One's kind of a cheat, but one's actually a short. It was made in the 80s. It's called Possibly in Michigan. Has anybody heard of that?
Yeah.
All right, Possibly in Michigan is made by a filmmaker named, hold on, I wrote it down. Concelia Condit is her name. And she did this movie about two girls shopping in a mall, but the mall's totally empty. And then one guy is like hunting them down, and he's wearing a mask of his own face. But the thing about this one is what we're talking about, like, it's like chintzy and fun and campy, and like this one's like kind of like an art piece. It's weird and abstract. It has like a David Lynchian, like on purpose kind of vibe to it, and it actually is really effective. So like when we're talking about like the beauty of shot on video stuff, like she actually goes for it in that regard, where she's like, this is a medium I want to utilize, and I want to utilize it to like its maximum effect. So that's one, Possibly in Michigan. And the other one is a cheat because it was a BBC special called Ghost Watch. Yes. Does anyone watch that?
Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting a round of applause for Ghost Watch. But for those who don't know, Ghost Watch was a BBC special, and it's like, I don't know Anderson Cooper of England, whoever that is, but like, he was like, I'm going to sit down and we're going to have a live view from this house that's supposedly haunted. It's not going to happen because blah, 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 blah. And then a roving camera goes in there and they're like, isn't this fun? It's Halloween, blah, blah, blah. And then weird stuff starts to happen and people start to get hurt and it's all that. And they're trying to convince like the UK that this actually happened. And it did for a degree. It was very much like a War of the Worlds scenario where they got a bunch of phone calls and like, what? Is there ghosts? Is there an afterlife? Do I have to worry about this now? What's happening? So if you just want to see like pandemonium because of a bad news special, I would really suggest Ghost Watch.
I would like to say one thing about Ghost Watch. So I own a bookshop in Selma, also called Ghoulish Books. And the last Saturday of the month, we always do a movie like at 8 o'clock at night. It's always free. You can come down. Recently, we did Ghost Watch, and we introduced it to the people by saying it was a real thing that was like recently discovered, and they were like, "What the fuck is this?" Yeah. It was great. So please, if you're local, come down last Saturday of the month.
It must have been crazy because, like, when the Blair Witch came out, and we were all like, "Is this real? What is happening? Why would you promote this if we're watching people get murdered? Why'd I pay ticket?
Yeah.
Why'd I pay the price of admission for this?" Same thing with Ghost Watch. Like, if it's just it's a live special on BBC, which is insane that they fucking did that,
Yeah.
and then you watched it and you're like, "What? There's ghosts? Like, that's something I have to worry about now?"
Real quick, I'm going to say mine is Captives by Gary Cohen. And then we did an episode on this movie, this shot-on-video fake commercial,
Like an
infomercial,
an educational video.
How to Get Revenge, starring Linda Blair. It is absolutely ridiculous if anybody's ever seen it. It's just segments of people showing how to get revenge against other people, like really nasty revenge too. Like if you don't like your neighbor, sign him up for porno mags and have him sent to his house, and his wife's gonna divorce him. Shit like that, tongue in cheek.
But stuff like that, but also like ways to kill people,
Ways to
basically.
kill people, yeah.
Like it's insane.
Hosted by Linda Blair, shot on video. It's wild, but it's on YouTube. So it's kind of like in the middle of like, is it a horror movie? It's not really. It's like really tongue in cheek, and it's only like 40 or 50 minutes. You're like, why was this made? This isn't a movie. What is this? So I'd recommend that. We're running out of timer, so I do want to open up the floor.
We don't have time.
No time for questions.
No.
Fuck all y'all. Thank you for calling.
Subscribe to Decayed Tapes. New podcast, new panel will begin in 5 minutes. So if you need to use the bathroom, please go take a break and come right back. The last panel of the fest will be
Wrestling
beginning.
panel. It's a wrestling panel.
As well, it should be a wrestling panel.
Oh, look who decides to show up. Lucas Mangum. Lucas, I missed my panel, Mangum.
You go on this panel. I thought it started soon. You don't know the program. I guess not.
Live spooky, die spooky.